Welcome back, my beautiful souls, to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always, where we explore intentional living, inner growth, and real world impact. Now, today's episode is a powerful one. We are diving into something called as mindful activism to understand how self awareness and personal development can actually fuel effective social justice work without leading us straight into burnout. And I couldn't think of a better guest than Mathias Lemos Castillo. Well, listeners, Matthias is a seasoned DEI consultant, cultural bridge builder, and a strategic advisor with years of experience guiding organizations towards real, sustainable change. His work doesn't just talk, it walks the walk, empowering underrepresented communities while helping businesses evolve into inclusive, thriving spaces. Well, we are going to explore what it means to stay grounded and the whole while pushing for justice in a world that often feels heavy, and why bringing our whole selves to activism might just be the most efficient act of all. So, with that, Matthias, welcome to the show, and it is such an honor to have you with us.
Thank you, Sana. The honor is mine, and thank you to the listeners for taking the time this morning over here for me, but I think it might be evening on your end of the world.
That's right. It's evening for me, but that's the beauty of technology on how it
It
connects
is.
all of us together.
It sure is.
Okay, yeah. So, Matthias, let's begin with the basics. What exactly is mindful activism for you, and how has your personal journey shaped your understanding of it?
Well, Sana, this is a great question. To start off, I think there's three pieces that I like to incorporate when we think about mindful activism. The first one is how do we balance that passion and advocacy that we have with some self-care practice, right? And how do we make sure that as we are, you know, creating these movement, creating change, what are we doing in return to also make sure that it's not affecting us internally? Um, which leads me to my second point too, is like, how do we integrate mindfulness technique already into the social justice work that is being done, not just here in the United States, but across the world, right? And there's a lot of mindfulness that need to be added, and it really can start in a number of different ways. Your words, the words that we're choosing, communication, how we practice being in the moment. And then I want to bring into that third point, like how do we create sustainable activism practices? So when I think about mindfulness activism, I think about, how do we create that balance again? How are we integrating the mindfulness technique? And then how do we make this sustainable? So um, it's long process that change happens, and we're consistently being able to show up authentically and with the energy that we need, because it is quite frankly very exhausting sometimes to be an activist.
It is because that's such a mindful definition of mindful activism, Matthias, and it resonates so deeply because sometimes giving out to others, helping others, it can take a toll on us. Uh, and sometimes we get disconnected from our body or inner awareness, and that's that exactly what in the long run makes the work ineffective or less effective, not ineffective. So it's like awareness isn't just a luxury, it is a non-negotiable, it is the groundwork for sustainable impact.
Definitely is, and it's very people centered at the work, so we can't forget that piece where people are at the center of the work, and people are people. So how do we create these places that are authentic for folks to show up as themselves, to learn, to grow, and ultimately take care? I think change is good. It means that you're growing from one thing to another, and that transition is important. That we also understand where we are internally ourselves and where we are like externally with others, and how do we move forward. I'm really excited about this conversation, Sana.
Yeah, definitely. Also, in your experience consulting with organizations, let's consider the current scenario as well. How do you help teams integrate mindfulness and DEI without it feeling like you're just another uh, some corporate initiative from the HR?
Uh, That's a great question, Sana. I think about that second point, like how do we integrate mindfulness technique into the work? And I mentioned already, like, your words, that's really ultimately what's important. How are you using your words and how are you being mindful of your communication when there is these challenging conversations arising? Um, these conversations oftentimes can be challenging in the sense that it's not something that everybody engages with or everybody's in a different level. So I think words is really important and being able to critically say, okay, my audience might react one way to these words, might react differently different with different words. So being able to adapt, communication is a key part of the work I do as a DEI consultant. And I always start with the words that we choose are really important. Um, and then move on to the second point I mentioned earlier. It's like, how do we also practice being present in the moment during the action? So whether we are in a group and there's 12 people, how do we invite everybody to be in the room, put away your cell phones, put away any distractions and be present in the conversation. And what is your role in the conversation and ultimately in the outcome? And there is, activities that you can use, you can do. I like a check-in at the beginning of the conversations, something that could be uh, tied to the conversation or completely random, like what's the good news that you have had recently that you want to share with the group, right? So questions like that and goes back to that communication piece that I mentioned earlier, allows us to pause, be able to read the room, share something that the group might not know about, ourselves in the group or something that might just be uh, repetitive or already known. But I love for that a moment for people to just share something about themselves at the beginning, and then pass it on to the next person, and allow for everybody to have uh, a turn. So that's a way to kind of keep people present. Share about a good news, share a book that you're reading, share an activity that the weekend. And you can also incorporate activities during the conversation itself. Um, I also like to focus on mediation because that's one way that allows us to also be focused and stay clear during the conversation. Again, these are challenging conversations that we're having, and it pushes individuals to not just be in their comfort zone, but to be in that growth zone. Hopefully, not in the panic zone. That's like the third danger, everything is going you feel like it's going wrong, but really lean into that second zone where we're in the growth, where we're sharing ideas, we're sharing experiences that allow for individuals to say, huh, this is interesting. I didn't think about it that way. And as a facilitator, my role in these conversations to be able to mediate and make sure that as points are being made, we can connect them back to that conversation, be able to allow the participants to run with it, play around with the idea, juggle around with it, form it into different shapes, and um, you know, bring it all back together at the end. So they're feeling like, okay, we had a productive conversation. We were in the moment. We communicated well, and how do we move on? So it's really interesting. I think you can apply a lot of these techniques to allow for the work to happen organically within organizations and outside and community work as well, which are both realms that I lean in on a daily basis.
Absolutely. That's the important word, daily basis. Not just a check the box culture or just exclusive something out of blue once in a month. I think this should be in the daily practices. So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, that's
from a business perspective as a job, it allows for folks to hold that change, hold that space, and completely understand it is a balance too, right? So I know it's as often as you can have these conversations in a group and then internally, and individually too. How are you? How is it showing up for you? Which then leads into that third point, right? The sustainability. How are we creating opportunities for folks to share what they're thinking, share what they're learning, and move forward? Because even if it's one step, and it moves. It's still progress, and that's really what this work implies is that you're moving slow, but you're moving with might and allowing for growth to happen naturally.
Right. Activism often comes, the point you mentioned in the initial conversation, it often comes with an emotional labor, especially for those from marginalized identities. So, what practices or strategies you personally use to protect your own well being while staying engaged in the work?
Yeah, to protect my own well-being, I like the value of transparency. Feel it, but don't let it stick. Let it go through you. In the sense that if you're sharing experiences and you from community members, or you're holding that, let's say you're talking about immigration, for example, and someone shares this experience that is really unique to them. It might be harsh. It might be, you know, they crossed the desert at some point to get to the United States, or they went through, apartheid in their home, or some sort of government um, punishment at their homeland that made them move, right? And you're holding these stories that are not your typical, like, hey, how's the weather conversation, right? As a facilitator, I really try to create spaces where, we can be transparent, we can hold these stories and make sure that as individuals, it's not sticking, but really be able to release that energy in a positive way, and in a way that is constructive. Um, I also like to use this model called an appreciate and create model personally. And I've worked this with a number of people in the past, but really what it focuses on for those that don't know what an appreciating model and create is focusing on what's working well rather than fixing problems. And is looking through a lens of, possibilities rather than limitation when you're working in this. And that changes the conversations a little bit, right? So you can ask a question around like, what are some successes that I have had so far in terms of, problem X? If we're talking about immigration activism, or some sort of other activism. You can look at what has been successes, and that changes the conversations a little bit because rather than focus on the negative and what's not been working, you're focusing on what steps have actually been taken to advance again, slowly but mightily, this movement that we're trying to create. Another question could be, how do we amplify our positive impact, or what are possibilities that excite us for the future? And, posing these questions allow for individuals to one, think, reflect, and be able to work together for an outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And also, I love that, especially, I also believe that uh, creating space for rest, although it's kind of, countercultural, but we are conditioned to believe that if we are not constantly doing it, then we are not contributing. That's what we know on the surface level. The people see that, okay, we are taking less. That means we are not doing the work required. But sometimes I think that rest or that pause or healing is the actual work happening. It's kind of empowering us from within, from inside out, to make a bigger, more effective impact.
For me, I think you're really touching on that point around like what are the different forms of activism, and not always just like let's take it to the streets and chant, right? Like I think with the world that we are in right now, there's different types of activism, right? You can be more on the digital side, sharing stories through Instagram, Facebook, sharing posts, sharing resources. You can do more of the education activism, which I think it's a little bit of where I land a little bit, where you conduct workshops, you're sharing knowledge, you're informing and empowering others. Or you can do other types of like legislative, community organized, environmental, and so on, so on. So activism looks different, and in every movement. And the beauty that we're in is that there's very different ways to get involved. It's just picking one for folks to lean in and feel like they're doing that impact, and that impact worked in a method that feels like they're comfortable and can be able to shine through it. Um, there's also workplace activism, which is really big right now, being able to advocate for better working conditions, fair wages, or inclusive policies that allow for individuals to be better at the organization. So be creative is really one of the things that I often say about activists and how to be mindful during activism.
Absolutely. Okay, and as you mentioned, on the mindful, yes, some people say that mindfulness makes people passive. It softens that aggression, or that uh, it slows down urgency. So what would you say to the activists who fear that slowing down will dilute their impact?
That's a great one, Sana. I think slowing down naturally helps us really uh, create more impact. Um,
Mhm.
and I'll share it this way: sometimes you need to take a step back to take two steps forwards. It's an old saying, but it's real in this work because activism isn't a thing that happens overnight. It's more like a marathon. It's a thing that happens over a long stretch of time, and you need to pace yourself. I think I used this analogy recently, but I'll use it again. It's just being able to pace yourself through the movement and be able to see, okay, one side does one action, well, how is the other side going to react, and how do you react to that reaction, right? So slowing down in a movement is not necessarily wasting time, or allow not making the efforts shine. Is actually needed in these times because the fight is long, and you also need to make sure that you're incorporating time for your own well-being. So as emotions are rallying up, as things are happening, you're able to address them in a manner that is adequately mindful and be able to react accordingly. Sometimes rash decisions aren't as effective, but if we give ourselves the time to react and um, show the work that we are in a mindful way, I think you'll see longer impacts. I lost my train of thought almost for a second, so I was like, that's I paused a little bit. I was like, oh, where was I going with this?
Oh, that is beautiful. That is beautiful, Matthias. So, uh, if for those of our listeners who want to become more mindful in their activism, including me as well, but we don't know where to start, what small but powerful practice you would recommend to all of us?
Yeah, I would say start with reflection. Uh, Reflect on stuff, issues, and topics that are important to you, and how do you see yourself being that agent of change. Let me say it that way. For that topic, that issue, that drive that you have, um, and ask yourself, how can you place yourself at the middle of that problem to be this problem solver? I would say for folks that want to start with that. Reflect, and then once you're done reflecting, recover and make your actual steps and make moves. Really, it's my recommendation for folks that are oftentimes finding themselves like, I don't know where to start. Well, start with the internal, right? You want to make sure that you internally know what aligns with these issues, what aligns you with what's happening. Do you have a personal experience? Do you have someone that you know? Are you really passionate about the topic? Ask yourself those questions. And once you feel like you have a really good sense of, I did my reflection, you recovered your energy, make the steps to take action, right? Because it's not just the reflection, it's also the movement piece. And how do you take action is, you know, do you find an organization that is aligned with your values and the movement that you want to be part of? You You start having these conversations with colleagues, the community members. Maybe it's that guy at the gym, right? It's like, hey, what's your idea on this? And you start seeing what's already being done and how can you be part of that solution. Um, Start there, and you'll see that it'll start working like a domino effect.
That's such a resonating advice, and I have noted it down. And I encourage all of our listeners to also take this as a beautiful takeaway and to start, reflect back upon their journey of activism and embrace mindfulness into this for a sustainable and long-term impact. And Matthias, finally, if our listeners would like to connect with you to seek more of your wisdom, how they can do that.
Uh, Thank you, Sana. I bring experience of say, not yet wisdom. I still got lots to learn, but I've been really active on LinkedIn, so feel free to give me a follow, connect, and always happy to chat with folks around what's going on in their realm and how can we be, solution oriented.
Definitely. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes in there. And thank you so much, Matthias, for sharing your wisdom, your energy, your truth with all of us. And thank you for bringing more awareness into mindful activism. I think it's not doing about less, it's doing it better with more presence, integrity, and sustainability. So thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Sana, and thank you to the listeners.
And to all of my lovely listeners, if you have connected with this conversation, do make sure to connect with Matthias. I'll have all the links in the show notes in there. And also, from my heart to all of you, your healing matters, your impact matters. And the way you show up for yourself and for others, it can shape the kind of world we are building together. And if you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to share it with a friend, colleague, or anyone of your loved ones. Leave us a review because that helps us bring more such interesting and insightful conversations with incredible guests like Matthias. And follow us for more episodes that keeps your soul nourished and your purpose on fire. Until next time, stay grounded, stay brave, and stay mindful.